بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our lessons on the work of Shaykh Abdus-Salaam bin Barjis, Aali Abdul-Kareem rahimahullah, on the topic of Al-Jarh, والتعديل, praise and criticism. And we stopped last week in a discussion about what does it mean when we say praise, what does it mean when we say criticism. And we said that praise is for the people of Sunnah and dispraise is towards the people of innovation, misguidance. So ultimately, you praise the people of Sunnah, people of Khair, and you criticize the people of misguidance. And this is what's intended by the science and the subject matter. Not that we criticize or we declare as innovators the people of Sunnah, nor do we give ta'deel and praise and recommendation to the people of misguidance, because ultimately that is not what we want to be doing. And that's not the guidance, the truth that we're looking at. And we mentioned then a principle which the Shaykh is going to build on, which is a statement of Abu Bakr bin Ayyash, rahimahullah, who is also known as Shu'bah, one of the 7 known qira'at. When we recite the Quran, one of them is Shu'bah and Nafi', right? Hafs and Asim, Shu'bah and Asim. One of the qira'at that we know. So this narrative of the qira'at is also narrative hadith. Abu Bakr bin Ayyash, rahimahullah. One day a man came to him and he asked him, Ya Abu Bakr, man is Sunni? Oh Abu Bakr, who is a Sunni? And it's important. The question he's asking, what is a person upon Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? How do we know? This is important because Sunni is also the term we use when we refer to a person who is upon the Sunnah. So Abu Bakr rahimahullah gave the following answer. And this is an answer we want to pay attention to. He said, الَّذِي إِذَا ذُكِرَتِ الْأَهْوَاءُ. He is the one who, if the misguidance is mentioned to him, the people of desires, people of innovation, لَمْ يَغْضَبْ لِشَيْءٍ مِنْهَا. وفي الرواية لَمْ يَتَعَصَّبْ لِشَيْءٍ مِنْهَا. If innovation is mentioned to him or her, he or she does not ascribe to any one of those, or they don't become upset on the account of any one of those. What does this teach us? The person of innovation is the one who, if you mention to him innovation in a negative way, he gets angry, she gets angry. Why? Because they're following the innovation. Whereas the Sunni, he ascribes himself to the Sunnah, so he only follows what's in the Quran and Sunnah. If ahwa, misguidance and desires mentioned, he doesn't get angry. Because we know that misguidance, and specifically innovation, is the worst of things. وَالشَّرُّ الْأُمُورِ مُحْدَثَاتُهَا. And the worst of affairs is that which has been invaded. This is a very important principle. It's mentioned by the ulama like Imam Al-Ajurri in his Kitab al-Sharia and the Isnad al-Sahih. It's also mentioned by other ulama like Imam Al-Shatibi in I'tisab Ibn Taymiyyah in Al-Istiqama. Now the Shaykh says, if this is the case, we see and explain it. Now the Shaykh is going to explain this statement. He said, I found an amazing, beautiful principle for the one who deserves to be called with this title. So the Shaykh is now going to build off of this. That he already explained that what we take from this narration is ascription. Whoever ascribes to the Sunnah is praiseworthy. Whoever ascribes himself to innovation is blameworthy. Now the Shaykh, after he mentioned this point, he's going to now teach us about what we can learn from this. He says, rahimahullah, I found an amazing, beautiful principle for the one who deserves to be called Ahl Sunnah, or a person from Ahl Sunnah. And this was written by or said by the Imam of Ahl Sunnah, a man from the men of the people of the Sunnah who stood firmly against the people of innovation, and that is none other than Imam Abu Muhammad al-Hassan bin Ali al-Barbahari. Many of us are familiar with that name, Imam al-Barbahari, rahimahullah, in his Sharh al-Sunnah. Imam Barbahari, rahimahullah, said the following statement. He's teaching us, how do you know someone's according to the Sunnah? He says that it is not allowed for a man to say so-and-so is a companion of the Sunnah or a person of the Sunnah until he knows that person combines all the characteristics of the Sunnah. So it is not said of him, a person of Sunnah, until he combines all of it. So what is Imam al-Barbahari teaching us, rahimahullah? You can call someone Sahib al-Sunnah. Sahib al-Sunnah is a high praise. But what he's trying to highlight is a person of true Sunnah. One of the highest praises you can give. Until somebody gathers all the khisal al-Sunnah. He has all the qualities of the people of Sunnah. Until you find someone who gathers all of those qualities, you can't call them a person of Sunnah truly. Here Shaykh Abdus-Salaam says, here we learn a benefit. The person who deserves the title Ahl Sunnah, a person, people of Sunnah, Rajulun min Sunnah, al Sunnah, Sahib al Sunnah. He says this description is only for its true people. It cannot be given to, for example, he says the one who says the Ash'a'ira, an Ash'ari, the one who ascribes to the earlier Aqeedah, Abu Hassan Ash'ari, before he repented. Right? We know Ash'a'ira are the people of misguidance. For those who are not familiar, the Ash'a'ira are one of the many groups of innovation who have an Aqeedah which is not the Aqeedah of the Sahaba, and the Aqeedah Salaf. Okay, the Aqeedah is a mixture of different groups, mainly of the Mu'tazila and the Kullahabiyya and like this. So the misguided group. He says you can't say the Ash'a'ira are from Ahl Sunnah, and whoever says that has lied and has fabricated. He said a statement of falsehood and slander. He has to fear Allah. Why? The Shaykh says because whoever wants to give the title Ahl Sunnah, he can only give it to the person who actually holds fastly to the Sunnah and its people. And we live in an era of the time of fitan, a time of trials and tribulation when it comes to the religion of Allah. How many people make apparent the Sunnah that after examination and thorough research, it becomes clear that they resist the people, they resist the Sunnah or they oppose the Sunnah in many affairs. So the benefit the Shaykh is telling us here, for someone to come and say the Ash'a'ira or any other innovative group, Qadariyya, the Khawarij, these are Ahl Sunnah. It's a grave error. Because what does the term Ahl Sunnah mean again? The people who are following the Quran, the Sunnah, as the early generations did, who they have agreed upon the principles and the practice. If you come and you say somebody else who opposes that is also Ahl Sunnah, what have you done? You have misapplied the term and you have also extended the term to the wrong usage. For example, we don't call a Shi'i, someone who follows the way of the Shia, a Sunni. Why? Because they have a foundation, the principles against the Sunnah. So the point is that this is a dangerous practice people do. I said, if someone says Ahl Sunnah, everybody's Ahl Sunnah. What's the problem with this? Ahl Sunnah cannot be everyone. Because the Sunnah has a certain principles, practices, the way the Sahaba follow the Prophet ﷺ way. So therefore there's this Ahl Sunnah, there's Ahl Bid'ah. Today we have this problem, and we said a couple of weeks ago, when you hear the word Ahl Sunnah, the word Ahl Sunnah, it has two meanings, general and specific. So somebody sometimes confuses this and says, so-and-so is a person of Sunnah. And we may say, well, what do you mean by that? Generally, if they're not following the way of the Shia, then yes. But specifically, then no. Because a person of Ahl Sunnah follows Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah in their Aqeedah, right? In the way that they follow the manhaj, the methodology, and how they do their deen, their ibadat, the suluk, the adab, everything they follow Sunnah. So today we have to be wary of this practice of just calling people upon Ahl Sunnah without evidence. This is what the Shaykh is telling us. Be wary of this. Because what does Imam al-Barbahari teach us? You can't really call someone Sahib al-Sunnah, a true companion of the Sunnah, unless he has all the qualities. So this is one of the problems people fall into. Just lightly labeling everybody upon the Sunnah. Now the Shaykh gives us a proof for this. He says, it's narrated from Hudhayfa bin Yaman, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And one day he took two rocks, and he put one rock on top of the other. And he said to his companions next to him, do you see? So he has one rock and another rock on top of it. He said, do you see any light passing through or between these two rocks? And his companions said, Ya Abu Abdullah, ma nara baynahuma min an-nur illa qalilan. We don't see very much light passing through there except a little bit. You put two rocks one on top of the other. Very few light is going to pass between it. He says, by the one in whose hand my soul is, yani Allah, a time will come when the innovation will spread so much that truth will not be recognized or will not be known except to the amount of light you see now passing through this gap between the rocks. And people will then innovation will become so widespread that if someone left something of that, someone left some bid'ah, people will say they left the sunnah. Okay, so this is a narration from Hudhayfa bin Yaman. It's supported by Imam Ibn Waddah in his Kitab al-Bid'ah, hadith number, or athar number 162. Ibn Waddah, he has a book called Bid'ah, number 162. However, the chain of narration, there's a weak narrator, Nu'man ibn Nu'aym ibn Hamad, who is truthful but he makes mistakes. So the narration has some weakness. Just mention this point. So the narration has some weakness, but something similar has been said, at least the last part, by Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and it's authentic in Sunan ad-Darimi. That a time will come where people will grow old into the bid'ah until if someone comes later to change the bid'ah, like me and you, and we come and say, uncle, father, this is not sunnah, people will say that you're changing the sunnah. You come to making car of the sunnah bid'ah, but then they're going to see you changing the sunnah. So, if Shaykh says, here we learn that in the times like ours, this is the times that the Shaykh is mentioning. Hudhayfa's narration, even though it has weakness, is applying to our times, where the people of sunnah are less, or at least the ability for people to know the right from wrong is limited, unfortunately, and innovation is widespread. Hence, to just label everyone Ahl Sunnah is not befitting. Before continuing, I want to mention Shaykh Salih Fawzan, Hafidhullah, his commentary on Sharh Sunnah al-Barbahari, when he comments on the narration of Barbahari. Shaykh Salih Fawzan, you can find this even in the English translation of the commentary of Sharh Sunnah al-Barbahari, volume 2, page 766 to 767. Because Shaykh Salih Fawzan explained the book in Arabic, it's also translated 2 volumes in English. So the Shaykh says, do not commend, Salih Fawzan is saying, do not commend or praise a person except with knowledge, so that people will not be deluded by your praise of him. Well, this is the case, while his case is not as such. When you have a certain about him, his way, his knowledge, his steadfastness, you can commend him. But for you to go ahead and praise and make commendation or recommendation without knowing anything about him, this is dangerous. Such is a dangerous commendation that will deceive the people about this person. Those who commend people should stop at that. They do not commend except when one fulfills the conditions which require it. What is the Shaykh teaching us here? You cannot go around calling people upon the sunnah, so-and-so's upon guidance, illa bid-dalil wal-ilm. You have to have knowledge that this person is upon the sunnah. And this is a very important point because it's connected to a bigger issue. A bigger issue, which is if you don't know somebody's status, whether they're a person of sunnah or a person of bid'ah, what do? What is our position? If I don't know someone is upon the sunnah or bid'ah, I make tawaqquf. I suspend my judgment. I don't know. Pay attention, brothers. Today, somebody will come and say, that person is good, that person is bad, with no knowledge, no research, no investigation. How do you know? And we cannot make those judgments illa bidalil. Which leads us to the question then, if I don't know somebody's hal, are they upright or they're not upright? You cannot say that they're upright just because. Just like you cannot commend someone illa bidalil, you can't make jarh, criticism illa bidalil. Today, people are too lax when it comes to that. I haven't heard anything bad about him. That doesn't mean he's Ahl Sunnah or Salafi. See today how people are going, this person is Salafi. Why? I haven't seen anything else. That's not correct. That's not the asl. And this is now the issue. The ulama go backwards into a bigger issue, and from there came this issue. So I'm going to explain the original issue, and then we're going to get to our present issue. The origin of people, al-asl fil nas, or fil Muslim, is it adala am jahala? I have to understand this principle of this. Al-asl fil nas, khasatan fil muslimin. Al-asl, the origin of human Muslims, is it trustworthiness or ignorance? What do I mean by that? Somebody is a Muslim. Does that mean he has adala, is adil, is just, upright? Or is it ignorance? I don't know. The ulama differed on this way back. And some of them said, asl fil muslimin or fil nas al-adala. Anyone you meet, you don't know them, he's Muslim, he's good, he's upright. And why is this important to know? If this issue is true, by extension, al-asl fi nas, is it sunnah or bid'ah? Same issue now. If you say asl nas adala, that means anyone who speaks, mashallah, you can take anything he says, adala. No, this is not correct then. The other group of scholars said, no, al-asl fi nas jahala, rather that dhulm. Most people, the general condition of mankind, Muslim included, is ignorance and oppression. And so if someone speaks to you about something or you meet them, I don't know them yet. Even if it's Muslim, it means he's still Muslim, but I don't know if he's reliable or not. Just not just yet. And why is this difference important? Because ultimately, when you listen to people for the first time or you meet them, you're not going to suspect anything from them, but it doesn't also mean you're going to take everything from them. So when Allah tells us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, idha ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu, all you who believe, when when a wicked person comes to you with a report, clarify it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that when someone comes to you with something, if he's wicked, you reject it. But if the situation was that everyone else is accepted, then why would we need to be checking who's wicked and who's not? Some of the scholars, they said, no, the correct opinion, because there's two opinions, one nice opinion with a conclusion which is just, but many of our contemporary scholars in the past included, past and present scholars, held the view at the very least, the stronger view is that the asl of people and Muslims is not uprightness. And this was the view of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And where did he get it from? وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ What does Allah say? إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Allah says, mankind, they took the responsibility of the deen. Most people are ignorant, oppressive. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah then said, whoever says the asl of the Muslimin, asl of the people, is uprightness, and he also mentioned the Muslims, is uprightness by themselves, that this is batil, this is falsehood. And he mentions ayah. He said, rather most people, even if they say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, we need to investigate. And the reason why I'm saying that is that from that original issue came the other issue, is the origin of people, sunnah or bid'ah. So before we go into the next issue, we have to understand the debate. One group of scholars said that asl of all people is adala. Everyone's reliable until otherwise proven. Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, one of the ulama of our time, Muhaddith al-Madinah, he said, if that's the situation, then why do we need jarh and ta'dil? Everybody's, mashallah, already thiqah. He said, this is wrong. We need jarh and ta'dil because people are not reliable to begin with. That's more correct. We have to, why do we say someone's thiqah, someone's da'if, if everyone's reliable? That's one. But number two, in today's era, where everybody, we don't know, bid'ah, the sunnah, everything out there, the best conclusion is, it depends on the person. Both could be possible. So the conclusion then is the asl of people is that they could be upright or they could be wicked. We don't know. There's possibility of both. Therefore, someone comes to you with something, you verify. If it's reliable, they have good signs, they're never trustworthy. If they bring you wickedness or they're liars, then they become unreliable. And this conclusion is in conclusion Imam al-San'ani, rahimahullah, and Tawdih al-Afkar. And this is a very good conclusion. It depends on what people come to you with. And asl, if someone comes to you, I have to check. He's reliable, what he said. I can't see the asl is this or this. Both can be true. Why would we have to know this first, brothers and sisters? Hence, somebody online, I don't know their biography, I don't know who they are, I don't know. That's your position, I don't know. Not, he's good. Why? Because he had a good speech? La yakfi. Not sufficient. Someone else comes, he's bad. Why? Because people are always bad. Not sufficient. This guy could be good. You have to suspend your judgment and find out. Do your research. And the reason why people have to know this, too many people praising people online with no evidence. If you ask someone, why is this person Ahlul Sunnah? And they say something, you're going to have to bring proof, right? Something like this. They can't say because he has a good lecture. What's the usul he follows? Please, can you tell me? See, opposite is true. Someone else, I don't know him. You come and say this guy's bad. When I ask you, brother, what's his mistakes? You have to list for me. Otherwise, you can't see that either. This is the number one problem. From the asl of adal and jahala, we move to the next issue. Is the origin of someone a Sunni, Salafi, or Mubtadi' or Bid'i? Same thing, both ihtimal. We don't say this or we don't say that. We don't. Asl, very least, we could say, is not Sunni. It's not Salafi asl. Asl is, it's possible, both can be possible. Hence, someone comes to you, you talk to them, he could be a person's khair. After investigation, I say, mashallah, this person upon the Sunnah. Someone else comes to you, you don't know them, you talk to them, you investigate, subhanAllah, this guy's misguided. Not from the origin, based on what they tell you and what you can investigate. Why is that important? If me and you have to take that approach, that we have to hold back judgment, be careful of praising people without evidence. Be wary of criticizing people without evidence. Make sense? This is a very important asl, this issue the ulama discussed before, because it solves a lot of problems that we have today, unnecessary praise, and also the problem of undue criticism. Both of them are bad. If you say somebody is misguided, you need proof. If you say someone's guided, you need proof. With that being said, we now go to the Shaykh. Now he's going to tell us chapter التحذير من الحزبيات والأهواء, warning against hizbiyya, partisanship, and parties and desires, and the people of desires, in innovation. He says, therefore, to distinguish somebody from being from the Sunnah or not is something which requires a lot of effort and a lot of fatigue and exhaustion. And the Shaykh says, then ultimately, this is something which somebody has to exert effort to do. However, we could get some signs from the following. And there's a way we can find out if someone is good or not, an easier way, which is the following. Somebody, for example, ascribes to a group from the groups within Islam, contemporary groups. Everyone understands groupism, partisanism, hizbiyya, ahzab. In Islam, hizbiyya is haram. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا كُلُّ حِزْبٍ مَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. Allah said, don't be like the polytheists who have divided themselves, their religion, into parties and sects. Each sect and party is happy with that which they have. So partisanship, hizbiyya, is haram. Some of the modern Muslims have formed groups. And if you're familiar with Hizb al-Tabligh, we call it Jama'at Tabligh or Tabligh Jama'ah. Ikhwanul Muslimin, Muslim Brotherhood, another group. Hizb al-Tahrir, the Liberation Group. All these groups, you can find online details about their misguidance. And I'm sure you heard their names before. Right? So each one has a specific methodology, founder, principle, etc. Oh, Takfir or Hijrah. Some of us, we don't know them maybe. This is a Jama'ah from Egypt, Jama'at al-Takfir wa Hijrah. One of the worst Khawarij of our era, led by a man named Shukri Mustafa. Very dangerous group. Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah has a small risala where he warns against Jama'at al-Takfir wa Hijrah. A very extreme group. Right? If you read about them, you say, subhanAllah, who are those guys? And very extreme. But another group. The Shaykh says all these groups, yuwali wa yu'adi, they make wala and bara, allegiance, disallegiance, to their group. And this is not permissible for the people, and it's not permissible to call them the people of Sunnah when it comes to the issue of using the term Ahl Sunnah. So if someone says this kind of person is Ahl Sunnah, then keeps quiet, then this kind of utterance is a mistake. You guys following me? This kind of utterance is a mistake. Someone comes to you and says, I'm a Sufi, I'm a Tablighi, I'm an Ikhwani, I'm a Tahriri, and I'm part of the Takfir or Hijrah, Jama'ah, like this. That person, you can't call him Ahl Sunnah because he's clearly ascribing to a group that's against the way of Ahl Sunnah. All of us would agree to that because the person is ascribing himself to that. He's telling you he's part of this group. So now the Shaykh is telling us that ultimately, if you find someone who does this, then this would be indication of what group they're following. They're telling you they follow that group. So it would not be correct then to ascribe to someone to be from Ahl Sunnah if they're telling you I'm Tablighi or otherwise. Clear? Because ultimately, he says, the methodology of Ahl Sunnah is clear. And these well-known groups and parties, they have clear methodology which is against the Sunnah. So it's obligatory, he says, upon the one who is a man who is in agreement and conformity to the Sunnah, to be from the people of Sunnah if he follows all of that of its affairs. He says, one day a man came to Imam Malik rahimahullah and said, Ya Abu Abdullah, I'm going to ask you a question, right, about an issue, and I'm going to use your statement as a proof between me and Allah in terms of what you said. Imam Malik rahimahullah said, MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. So the man said, he says, ask me. The man said, I'm asking you, who is Ahl Sunnah? Imam Malik said, Ahl Sunnah are those people. Imam Malik rahimahullah says, Ahl Sunnah are those people. They don't have any laqab, they don't have any nickname or title which they're known by. They're not Jahmi, they're not Qadari, they're not Rafidi, until the end. Reported by Ibn Abdul Qaadir in Kitab Al-Intiqa. This is a well-known statement in scholars cite from Imam Malik. The man asked him who was Ahl Sunnah. He said the one who he has no other title or description except for Ahl Sunnah. He wouldn't say I'm Jahmi, I'm Qadari, I'm Rafidi. That's the groups of the past. Today, Tablighi, Ikhwani, Tahriri, Khariji, you name it. Why is this important, this point here? If somebody today wants to follow the Sunnah, they must have a correct description. What are the correct descriptions you can describe yourself with that's in accordance to the Sunnah? We talked about last week, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's a correct description. There's evidence for it. Sunni, Athari, Salafi, all those have been reported from the Imams of the past. If someone comes to say today and says, well, if you're using those terms, I'm going to use my own terms. You can't, because you need proof. The Sahaba and the Salaf, they use the terms I just mentioned. If you come with a new term, but you have no ascription to the earlier scholars, then that's innovated. And we're not allowed to take those. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He tell us about these kind of namings and groups? Because the Shaykh now is going to quote Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah's statement. Allah referred to us as Muslims. In the Quran, it's Surah Hajj. And the Sahaba and the Salaf allowed other usages which indicate the correct path. Whatever they use, we use. Whatever they didn't use, we're not allowed to innovate and use. Right? Because Allah criticized the non-Muslims in the Quran that these are just asma'un sammaytumuha antum aba'ukum. These are names you and your forefathers came up with. Ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. No authority, no proof for it. But no one should equate Sunni with Ikhwani or Tablighi. It's not the same. One has the Salaf saying it, and the other one someone made it up. You see, some people try to say about it, if you say Salaf is innovation. How is it innovation? It was known in the past. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam used the word Salaf. Right? When he told Fatima, I'm a great Salaf to you. But even after him, as early as the 4th century Hijri, there were people called Salafiyun and Salafi. It's not the same. If the Imams are using it. Whereas these groups, they're coming and ascribing to something, number one, which is wrong. Because what you're ascribing to must be correct firstly. You're ascribing to Hizb that goes against Quran and Sunnah. That's not even a good thing. Second thing is your ascription is also innovated. Ayastawun. It's not the same, brothers. So we have to understand this point of ascription. If you're going to ascribe yourself to anything, it's the Sunnah. Imam Malik saying this, right? The groups that came after, they started making up their own kind of ascriptions, and they were not accepted by the Sahaba and the Salaf, like Jahmiyyah or Jahmi, Qadariyah, the Rafida, etc. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah writes in Musiyat al-Kubra, the major or the detailed advice. This is likewise dividing the ummah and testing them with that which Allah has not revealed in the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Shaykh gave some examples. Someone saying, I'm a Shakili, or Qarfandi, or other names which are names of Batila. These are falsehood names. And Allah has not revealed an authority for, nor is it found in the book of the Sunnah, nor is it found from the well-known Salaf of this ummah. And the Shaykh keeps going, explaining that ultimately a Muslim cannot ascribe himself to those things. Why? Because those names are not in the Quran, they're not in the Sunnah, but they're not in the practice of Salaf. I want you to understand this point. Somebody might come to you and say, but you said you're using terms which are not found in the Quran and Sunnah, but it's found in the Salaf. And the Salaf and their practice is Hujjah. You guys agreed? Salaf, their practice of the deen is Hujjah. وَالَّذِينَ تَبِعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Allah says, those who follow the Sahaba بِإِحْسَانٍ. وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ تَبِعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Allah commanded us to follow the Sabiqun, right, from the Muhajirun, the early forerunners of this ummah, the emigrants. وَالْأَنصَارِ, and the Ansar, the supporters, and those who follow them good. They go to Jannah. We have to follow them. If they use Ahl Sunnah, mashallah, and they use other terms too. But today, if someone comes and says, what about these newer terms? Well, where did you get it from? Not in the Quran, not in the Sunnah, not in the Amal and the Ijma' and Sahaba and Salaf, then this is innovation. He brings a statement, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, that one day a man came to Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma saying, are you upon the millah of Ali or the millah of Uthman? At that time there was some turmoil in the ummah. He said, I'm not ablastu ala millat Ali wala ala millat Uthman, bal ana ala millat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, I'm not upon the religion of Ali or Uthman, I'm upon the religion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is he negating the Ali and Uthman upon the Sunnah? No. He said, I'm not using these terms. This is what he's trying to say. You won't come to me and tell me you're following Ali and Uthman. Ali and Uthman follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And how do we know this? Right? What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tell us as parting advice? عليكم بسنتي سنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين من بعدي عضوا علي بالنواجذ. Quran and Sunnah, follow Sunnah. And those who came after 4 Imam, rightly guided Imams, they're all following the one path. So what did Ibn Abbas try to do there? Close the door to someone who's trying to divide the Ummah with new terminologies or were not accepted by Salaf. Likewise, one of the Salaf, he said, I don't know which of the two blessings of Allah is greater upon me. That Allah guided me to Islam or Allah protected me from ahwa, misguidance, and deviation, innovation. See how great of a ni'mah it is? To be a Muslim is the greatest ni'mah. But on top of that, a ni'mah just as great is to be upon the Sunnah while being a Muslim. Not the same, brothers, right? Because many people are upon Islam, but they're not upon the Sunnah. It's sad. So we have to see how this Imam said, I don't know which of the two blessings I should be considering greater. That Allah guided me to Islam or Allah protected me from innovation. Also, the Shaykh says, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, that in the Quran, Allah called us Muslims. So we do not turn towards names that are other than that, which have not been brought down by evidences. Rather, they're names that your forefathers have used, which Allah has not revealed any authority for. Taken from Majmu' Fatawa, Ibn Taymiyyah, volume 3, page 415. So now the Shaykh says, ascribing to groups and sects and parties is a great danger and a great grave harm. And it's obligatory upon a person to free themselves from that and to free themselves in front of Allah from other than following the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the Shaykh says, concluding this chapter, as for the people of innovation, he said, then whatever is connected to the term Ahl Sunnah, that we know then that now we know what the definition of that term means and who deserves to be called by it. Now we know what Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah means and who deserves that title. The one who follows the Sunnah and the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in his principles, in his aqidah, in his methodology, manhaj, in the way they worshipped Allah, in their behaviors, mannerisms, all of it. As for Ahlul Bid'ah, then that term is a critical term, of a term of criticism. And we're going to explain now what does it mean when we say Ahlul Bid'ah. So before continuing, we have to understand then the people can be divided into these wider categories. Ahlul Sunnah and Ahlul Bid'ah. A Muslim has to know that. Because Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he told us that this ummah will break into 73 sects, he didn't say all of them are guided. What did he say? كُلَّهَا فِي النَّارِ إِلَّا وَاحِدَةً. All of them are heading towards the hellfire except for one. Now you have to understand the hadith properly. Hadith iftiraq, a lot of people don't understand it. You have to understand what it means properly. But the Prophet hasn't warned us from other groups. And there's one way that's correct. The Sahaba in Sahih Muslim, Muqaddim Sahih Muslim, what Ibn Sirin rahimahullah mentioned, when the fitna occurred, we started to ask the people whether they're upon their narrations, their isnad. And when they gave us the isnad, if they were from Ahlul Sunnah, we would take their narrations. And if they were from Ahlul Bid'ah, we would reject their narrations. Why does this teach us? If someone isn't Ahlul Sunnah, then obviously they will fall into Ahlul Bid'ah. But of course, that also means that there is different levels as well, as we're going to look at. There's different levels of Bid'ah. But we need to understand Ahlul Bid'ah is a term of criticism. Because Bid'ah is madhmoomah in the deen. It's madhmoom, blameworthy. And Sunnah is mahmood. It's praiseworthy in the deen. Now the Shaykh says, Bid'ah, all of it is described with misguidance. And he says, when you hear the word Bid'ah, then all of it is described as being misguidance. Based on the hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ. All of innovation, misguidance. However, he says, Bid'ah, as misguidance, it varies in the level of misguidance. Some of it is higher level misguidance, and some of it lower level misguidance. Okay, first thing we take, Bid'ah, we're talking about here is the Bid'ah fi d-din. Al-ibtida' fi d-din. Innovating in religion, not dunya. Because when we use the term Bid'ah, there's a different levels of understanding of what Bid'ah is, right? Bid'ah could have a meaning of a linguistical meaning, ta'arif al-lughawi, You can also have a ta'rif al-shar'i, a legislative meaning. I'm going to explain in a second. But what's the general rule? All bid'ah is misguidance. All of it. That means some of it is worse than others, but none of it's good. How do we know that? Prophet ﷺ said, Kullu bid'ah. Every type of innovation. Kull min al-fad al-umum. We said it in Usul al-Fiqh before. Kull, the word kull is from the terms of, indicates generality. The Prophet ﷺ didn't exempt any bid'ah. So the Shaykh is telling us some of it's worse than others. But all of it is bad. So this is important. Some people say, if I tell you something is better than something else, it doesn't mean the other one is good, right? If I say this place is better than that place, it doesn't mean the other place is still good. This is bad, but this one's worse. That's what I'm telling you. Because some people, when they hear this is better than that, they say, oh, mashallah, there's a good one too. No, I didn't say that. So this is a benefit to take. Imam al-Shatibi, he writes in Kitab al-I'tisam, the best book on the Bid'ah brothers, Kitab al-I'tisam, Imam al-Shatibi. If you don't know this book, you should know. The best book written on the subject of Bid'ah in the history of Islam, Kitab al-I'tisam, Imam al-Shatibi. It's in English, translated even to a certain degree, wallahu a'lam. It's not complete perfectly, but still gives you the gist of it. There, Imam al-Shatibi, he says, rahimahullah, that the bid'ah has levels. وَمِنْهَا بِدْعَةٌ مُحَرَّمَةٌ. One of the categories of bid'ah is bid'ah which is absolutely haram. And some of it's bid'ah makruha, bid'ah which is disliked. Now before we continue, somebody may misunderstand Imam al-Shatibi now. He says, Imam al-Shatibi dividing bid'ah across the ahkam al-khamsa. Everyone knows ahkam al-khamsa. Wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh, haram. He said some bid'ah is haram and some is makruh. Somebody might say, subhanAllah, bid'ah makruh and haram. So the some bid'ah are good. Pay attention, Shatibi is not saying that. And this is why some people, they misunderstand this speech. And we're going to explain. He's going to tell you examples of bid'ahs. He says, some bid'ahs are kufr, clear kufr. Like the bid'ah of jahiliyyah, which Allah tells us in the Quran about. In jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic time, they had bid'ah. The Quraysh came with bid'ah and deen. Bid'ah and shirk, right? Some of the shirk they did was bid'ah. For example, they would release camels and release certain cows and keep others. This is for idols. This is bid'ah. But it's bid'ah in tawheed, shirk. That's very bad, right? That's the worst. That's kufr. Another one's bid'ah of the munafiqeen, bid'ah of the hypocrites. Right? And he says here, and this is a kind of bid'ah which is also blameworthy and very dangerous. Obviously, munafiqeen, when we use the term, we're talking about the munafiq asli, the original munafiq. And what they did was they pretended to take Islam as a vehicle to protect their wealth and their lives. Munafiqun, why did they say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah? Just to protect their wealth and their lives. They didn't believe. That's a bid'ah, right? Someone says, I'm a Muslim, just to get sadaqah and zakat. The bid'ah al-munafiqeen, right? This is what they did. It's kufr, right? That's another type. Bid'ah which is disobedience. He says, there's sometimes a bid'ah which is disobedience. You could consider it in disbelief, or you can differ over that. For example, the scholars differed about the bid'ah of the Khawarij, the Qadariyah, and the Murji'ah, and whoever was upon their way. It's very important. The earlier scholars, the Prophet ﷺ told us about the emergence of groups. He talked about the Khawarij, the Qadariyah, and in some hadith, the Murji'ah. Many people don't know. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned by name. Important. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned by name the Khawarij, Qadariyah, and the Murji'ah by name. And the reason why I'm saying that, there's some people who, under the pretense, using these names are bad. Who used them? Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? To warn you from them. People think, look, why are you dividing the ummah into these groups? I didn't start it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it. How come you don't know that? So many people, they don't know. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if the Khawarij exist in my time, what is he going to do? لَقْتُلَنَّهُمْ قَتْلَ عَادٍ. I would kill them the way Aad was killed. I would finish them off. Because the Khawarij is so dangerous to the ummah. The Prophet ﷺ said that. He said another hadith, Khawarij kilab al-nar. The Khawarij, the dogs of the hellfire, brothers. Hadith Sahih, Muslim, Ahmed. There's no shyness from this. Why am I saying this? Every time someone hears groups and names, they say, look at this. Salaf is coming, saying, making this guy, this group and that group. We're not saying it. It's hadith. But you know what's funny? You didn't know those hadith. You're never going to hear those hadith. Especially from certain speakers, they'll never tell you that. Hatta the ulama said the Prophet ﷺ spoke with Rafidah. Kitab al-Sunnah, Ibn Asim, Ali radiallahu ta'ala authentically said there's going to be a group coming after. They're going to hate, some of them are going to hate me and become kafir. Some are going to love me too much and become kafir. Who's that group? Yeah. Shaykh Al-Albani said, Sahih, walau hukm rafa'. Because it's impossible. Ali made that up. Allahu Akbar. For Prophet, how many groups now, brothers? I'm saying this because you have to know these usul. Khawarij, he talked about Qadariyya, Murji'ah, are not going to drink from the Hawd Yawm al-Qiyamah. By name, he said. And I have all the references. If you want later, I'll give you all the hadith numbers. Qadariyya and Murji'ah will not drink from the Hawd Yawm al-Qiyamah. Prophet said. Shaykh Al-Albani authenticated the hadith. You will not drink from my Hawd, he said, Yawm al-Qiyamah, that group. Then, we have 4. Why am I saying all this? Some of the ulama, when they heard the Khawarij are going to leave the deen, like the way the arrow leaves the quiver, they said, are the Khawarij Muslim or not? They differed. That's not our discussion today. But the Shaykh's telling you that's a ma'asiyah. It's a disobedience to be a Khariji, a Qadari, a Murji. We didn't have to teach the lay people. There are groups, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you hear someone narrating things that you and your forefathers have not heard, فَاحْذَرُوهُمْ, beware of them. Bukhari Muslim, beware of them, he said, alayhi salam. But then we are in a time and period, I don't know what happened. These ahadith became lost, and people say, brother, everybody's good. Let's stop talking about people. Let's not. Well, you're not reading the Rasul Shar'i? Or maybe the speakers you listen to are hiding it from you. Brothers and sisters, no Muslim should be burying their head in the sand. We have to wake up. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he talked about this, he's telling us, be careful. But today we live in an era, the average Muslim needs to be soft in this issue, slightly, just slowly. Tell them, there's a group called this, here's a hadith, there's a group called that, there's a hadith, then there's a group called Sunnah. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us who they are. Man kana ala mithli ma ana alayhi al-yawm wa ashabi. We have to do this, brothers. We have to explain this. Because I believe when we hear this, some people, they're already so confused. The whole worldview became confused. Because never in their life they ever had those ahadith. But they're in the Sahihain, some of them. Let's continue. One more. Bid'ah of this, that is also ma'asiyah, but not kufr. It's like the bid'ah of someone becoming a monast, abstaining from marriage altogether or becoming like a monk. Hadith Uthman ibn Mad'un, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he prohibited him. Uthman ibn Mad'un was known for his asceticism. He prohibited him at-tabattul, to become batul, which means I'm never going to marry. I'm going to just become a worship of Allah and no family. Whose innovation was that? Who innovated that practice, guys? Christians. ابتدعوها ما كتبناها عليه. See? Uthman ibn didn't know. He wanted to say, Ya Rasulullah, can I do this? Prophet said, not allowed. Ya Uthman, we don't have this in our ummah. No monasticism. Because the Jews, Christians made it up, number one. Just for our own information, Isa ibn Maryam, he didn't get married because Isa ibn Maryam is coming back and he's going to get married. From our Aqidah, he's going to get married. But some scholars differ with this clear text, but it's generally from the general text. So the Christians made it up. So therefore, Allah criticized them for making it up. That's a bid'ah. Or what kind of bid'ah? Makruh, ma'asiyah, but not kufr. If someone says, I'm religiously not going to get married. Religiously, I won't have family. We say, this is not correct. This is a bid'ah, brother. Because if you didn't want to get married, different ruling. But you say for religious purposes, not allowed. You can use as evidence also that Maryam alayhi salam did that. Someone will say, how Maryam? She was called Batul, yani didn't get married. We say, yeah, but that's a different sharia, brother. We're following the sharia of Mustafa alayhi salam. After Shaykh mentions the Shatibi, he says, after he mentions all this stuff, he says, well, no, the bid'ah, it's not of one level. So some of it is disliked, some of it's haram. Okay, after Imam Shatibi mentioned this, I need to clarify now something. Is Imam Shatibi saying that the bid'ah which is makruh is something which is halal to do? He never said that. He just said it's makruh and not kufr. Then Shaykh Abdus-Salaam says, look what Shatibi finished with his conclusion. He kept writing. He says, whoever affirms that bid'ah is blameworthy and it's prohibited and if all of it is not out of the same category, then you should know just because the bid'ah is considered disliked, it doesn't mean that it is, or some of it is disliked and some of it is haram, it doesn't mean that it is something which is good. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, all of bid'ah is misguidance. Now we have to understand what Imam Shatibi was doing. He was just going to give you the point. When we say bid'ah is some of it's kufr and some of it's not, we learn a valuable lesson. Someone could fall into bid'ah and still be a Muslim, but they committed a major sin. Somebody did a bid'ah and they're not a Muslim anymore because the bid'ah, the nature of the bid'ah is kufr. So when Shatibi said it's makruh, those of us who study fiqh with us, what kind of makruh? How much types of makruh are they? 3. We have the one which is tahrimi, one which is tanzihi, And the other one which says khilaf al-awla. Which one is it? Tahrimi, makruh tahrimi, which means it's haram. Shatibi is not saying, as some Muslims have said, for our own information, that bid'ah is 5 categories. Bid'atul muharrama, bid'atul mubaha, bid'atul makruha, bid'atul wajibah, bid'atul mustahabba. We don't believe that. I'm sure you heard this, right, brothers? Bid'ah wajib. Bid'ah wajib. What does this say, bid'ah? Who said this? Some of the scholars said this. And Shatibi directly responded to that and others. There's no such thing. Now you might say to yourself, but some of the great imams said this. Ibn Abdul-Salaam, right? Ibn Abdul-Salaam, for example, famously said this. And others have said the same. Shatibi is of the opinion, which is the correct opinion amongst the scholars, bid'ah is all bad. The only thing that bid'ah done difference then is between kufr and major sin. Between sin and more sin and more sin. That's what it is. Is there such thing as bid'ah hasana? We might as well talk about it while on the topic. Someone will come to you and say, Imam Shatibi's statement is one of the opinions of the ulama, but how about the famous narration of Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu? Everyone knows the narration. When Umar ibn Khattab, everyone prayed Taraweeh together in Jama'ah, what did he say? Ni'mat hadhi bid'ah, or he said, Ni'ma, how excellent bid'ah this is. Right? Umar ibn Khattab said, how excellent bid'ah this is. How do we answer that question, brothers? Umar ibn Khattab called Taraweeh a bid'ah. And so people say, subhanAllah, Umar Khattab called Taraweeh a bid'ah, so that means it's a bid'ah hasana. How do we respond to this? Anyone has an idea? Brother? MashaAllah, Prophet ﷺ did it, so there's can't be bid'ah. What else? Linguistic definition of bid'ah, not technical. So when Umar said, ni'mat hadi bid'ah, what he's actually telling us is he's using the definition of bid'ah, which is linguistic, not legislative. Now we have learned something very nice. Bid'ah has 2 meanings at the very least, amongst others. Bid'atul lughawiyya is a linguistic bid'ah. Example, anything which is brand new or has just been started, any haditha, brand new thing is called bid'ah in the Arabic language. Anything brand new, just started, freshly done, is called bid'ah. Any haditha. And when you say bid'ah in Islam, legislatively, there's a very good definition Imam Shatibi gives, the best one, but a simple one. Any newly invented practice is bid'ah shar'i, legislatively. Any new practice in the deen that has no prior evidence, لَيْسَ لَهُ مِثَالٌ سَابِقٌ, has no prior proof in the Quran, Sunnah, the way of the Salaf. Clear? Anything new in the deen which has no prior evidence. That's bid'ah Islamically. So when Umar said that Taraweeh is a bid'ah, as the brother said, but Prophet ﷺ did Taraweeh. How many days did he pray Taraweeh? Nabi ﷺ? 3-4 days, as mentioned in the Sunan. So Umar knew that. Umar, ashaddu fi deen Allahi. Who's the most severe in practicing deen? And the one who's most severe in applying deen, fi deen Allahi, Umar. Umar doesn't do bid'ah. One hadith, Rasul said, Hadith Tirmidhi, this man Umar, he hates batil. You think Umar is going to do bid'ah? It's also like, you forgot who we're talking about. Umar doesn't do anything like this. When he said that, he meant linguistically. How do we know? Hafid ibn Rajab said, because, pay attention, Umar knew the Prophet did it. So he said bid'ah linguistically because he never did in the Khilafah of Umar, Abu Bakr. And the first half of his Khilafah also wasn't practiced. That's what he meant. It's new, relatively speaking, but not new, Islamically speaking. Clear? And how do we know this? Because the word bid'ah has many more than one just meaning. Some of the scholars who said there's bid'ah hasana try to use that, say there's a bid'ah. But the problem with that understanding is that even Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, who some people try to use his statements, he said bid'ah is 2 types. That which conforms to the deen, that which doesn't. What doesn't conform to the deen is not bid'ah that where it's hasan anymore. Bid'ah hasana is sunnah hasana. That's what he's talking. That's what it is, right? At the end of the day. So it's very important to know there's no such thing as bid'ah hasana. Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said, "Kullu bid'atin dalalah wa in ra'aha an-nasu hasana." All innovation is misguidance, even if people think it's good. Therefore, we should not be confused in the idea there's 5 categories bid'ah. It's only muharrama or makruha. And makruha means bad, haram, and haram, the other one is even worse. It's between very bad, and some ulama say major sin, bid'ah is worse than major sin. and then the kufr one. And the reason why we have to know that is that somebody understands when we say Ahlul Bid'ah, this is the worst thing you can imagine. Somebody who innovates in the deen of Allah is doing the worst thing. وَالشَّرُّ الْأُمُورِ مُحْدَثَاتُهَا. The worst sin, the Prophet said, the worst of things are innovative things. We have to understand how severe bid'ah is. Because somebody may think Ahlul Bid'ah just means, if I said bid'ah is makruh, eating onion and garlic, Shaykh says, before coming to salah is makruh. Yeah, it's makruh. But what kind of makruh is that? Makruh in ibadah. No, makruh in the terms of adab. Not the same makruh, the bid'ah. You see somebody say, oh, it's makruh. That means you can do it. No, this makruh means haram, tahreeming. This one's tanzihi. Two different. Eating garlic and onion before coming to salah is bad etiquette. But it's not haram, the ulama say, in the sense that someone did it for udhr or reason or some other thing they forgot. It's okay, you can stay in the masjid. It's etiquette. But bid'ah in deen is haram. There's no such thing as a good one. Understanding this point means when Imam al-Shatibi was talking about bid'ah, and now he says Imam al-Bahari likewise, every bid'ah is bad, small or big. We have to program ourselves. When you hear bid'ah, astaghfirullah al-azim, the worst thing. Every khutbah, almost every khutbah, the Prophet used to say that. وَالشَّرُّ الْأُمُورِ. Shar, the worst of affairs. Today, bid'ah became very lax over time because people think it's just small. And Al-Bahari writes in Sharh Sunnah, beware of the small, newly invented matters. For a bid'ah which is small turns then to become big. And bid'ah is the one worst, the most hated affairs in ummah. And bid'ah, right, if it begins small and resembles the truth, will later then become bigger and people become deceived by it until the end of his statement. So it's very important that everyone should be in the same case. So when we see someone's Ahlul Bid'ah, what are we really saying? This person is upon serious misguidance. This is either they're doing a serious thing, for example, coming up with something which is a major sin, worse than a major sin, or they're following practice which is kufr. Hence, if you know how dangerous the word is, you wouldn't use it against other people that easily, right? Because if you understand what it means. Now the Shaykh says something in the next chapter, which we'll finish with today. الفرق بين التبديع بالإطلاق والعموم وبين التبديع بالتعيين. Very important chapter. The difference between unrestricted declaration of innovation or declaring someone an innovator unrestrictedly and declaring someone innovator specifically. And the Shaykh then he begins this chapter by mentioning something to us. He says, التبديع بالإطلاق والعموم. Declaring something to be innovation or innovative practice in general, unrestrictedly. An example of that is someone saying, لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. That my statement of the speech, of my statement or pronunciation of the Quran is created. Okay, before continuing, what is the Shaykh trying to teach us here? Sometimes the ulama declare something as bid'ah generally. Other times they declare something bid'ah specifically. Sometimes they declare something bid'ah generally, and other times they declare someone as mubtadi' directly. Big difference. I'll give you another example. Takfir al-mutlaq. Takfir, declaring something or someone as a disbeliever generally, and declaring someone kafir specifically. Are they the same thing, guys? Very different. Sometimes the ulama say such and such is kufr. Whoever does such and such is done kufr. That doesn't mean you make tanzil now and you put it on somebody. You need to follow principles. Somebody may hear, the Shaykh gave the example, whoever says the Quran, when I pronounce the Quran, it's created, this is considered deviant, a mubtadi'. Does that mean now I heard some random person saying, so you're a mubtadi' because you said that? And the Shaykh said, whoever says that, two different things. To come with two different principles, two different conditions, and two different preventatives. Many of the problems we have today, people taking what is mutlaq and making it muqayyid or mu'ayyan. I'll give you now the example. The ulama in the past, there was a big fitna, many of you are familiar with, if you come to the Wednesday class of Shaykh al-Fajr, talking about the issue of the Quran and its createdness. Many of you probably covered that in Aqidah. The Mu'tazila came with a newly invented idea, which is kufr, that the Quran is created. Everyone understands this issue? Quick summary, to say the Quran is created is to insinuate that one of Allah's attributes is created. As Allah speaks. And if Allah's speech is created, that means Allah is created. Oh, kafir. This is is kufr. Shafi'i rahimahullah said, whoever says the Quran is created, he's saying an attribute of Allah is created, and whoever says an attribute of Allah is created means Allah is created. You get now how dangerous it is. So this is something made up. They made it up, and they tested the people, and they trialed them, and they jailed them, and killed them, all this. After that fitna, it became clear, whoever says that is doing kufr. Then another group came and said, well, when I recite the Quran, my recitation of the Quran is makhlooq. See, they're confusing people. What do you mean by that? Could have two meanings or more, right? A good meaning, a bad meaning. But they try to confuse the people. So Imam Ahmed said this is bid'ah, whoever says that. Because some people are saying, when I read the Quran, it's bid'ah. It's created. Meaning, that on one angle, they could talk about their voice. The other angle, talking about what you're reading, the actual content. So the people were confused. Imam Ahmed said, whoever says that is mubtadi', is deviant. Because the innovator was trying to create a middle ground, a little space where they can confuse people. You hopefully understand why this is dangerous. Because if someone clearly said the Quran is created, it's kufr. But if you said the other ambiguous statement, we don't know what you intend, but the Imam Ahmed said even saying that is innovated. Because where did you get that from? Now, the Shaykh says this is a tabdi' ala wajh al-umum al-itlaq. This is a general statement. How do we know it's general? Man qala lafz, whoever says. Others, we have to understand general statements like whoever says such and such. It's conditional, right? Whoever says this, then they have fallen into this innovation. That doesn't mean if you find a random person and said, did you say that? Then you're also innovator. A lot of the problems online and in the communities, when people don't know these issues, they're making tabdi' and mu'ayyan of people bidun dalil. Or there's somebody who's jahil, they don't understand, they need to be explained to, and you just made tabdi' of them because you read it from the book or you heard from the tape of the Shaykh, you didn't know. Tabdi' wa tafsiq and takfir, serious issues. They exist in Islam, but they have conditions. Now the Shaykh says, if someone comes in and out, the second issue, tabdi' ala wajh ta'yin, which is a specific declaration of innovation. If you say so-and-so is, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, said the following statement, above aforementioned statement, and he's a mubtadi', that's different. You're making hukm on that person. The difference between general unrestricted declaration of innovation and specific one, the Shaykh says, is that there is no harm in making a general unrestricted declaration that something is innovation. There's no haraj, no harm, wala mahdhur, nor is it problematic. We say, whoever says this kind of does follow this innovation, they're an innovator. However, we don't specify someone by it, because the general unrestricted tabdi' is different than the unrestricted tabdi', the restricted version of declaring someone innovator. And then the Shaykh explains why. Because if someone falls into a specific kind of innovation, in order to declare that they are specifically misguided, you need to do what's called إقامة حجة. إذا أقامت عليه الحجة فرفضها. He said if someone is been told evidence, proved to them issue, then they turned away from that, then they continued, then in that case we can say he's a mubtadi'. So now we have to write that point down. In order to declare somebody specifically as the innovator, again, it's not for me, it's not for you. Whose job is it? If of knowledge, good knowledge, then they need to do what's called iqamat hujjah. You got to establish a proof on somebody. You can't just walk up to someone and say, do you say the Quran is created? Say, yes, okay, you're mubtadi'. You have to explain to him why it's bid'ah. The guy maybe is jahil. And jahil, ignorance, is one of the preventatives for tabdi'. We don't do tabdi' of the juhal, brothers. Sunnah, we don't make tabdi' of the ignorant people. After the person has to get the evidence first, understand that, what is intended by it, and after that they continue, then yes. Now I'll give you an example for this and we finish with this point. In the Quran, when Iblis did not prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, what did Allah say? What did Allah say? Did Allah declare him kafir first? Who can give us an ayah? What did Allah say to Iblis? مَا مَنَعَكَ أَنْ لَا تَكُونَ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. What prevented you, Iblis? Allah already knows. Allah is Al-Alim Al-Hakim. He already knows, but Allah wanted to establish the proof. See, why didn't you prostrate, oh Iblis? And then Iblis clarified the issue. I'm better than him. خَلَقَتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتُ مِنْ طِينٍ. You created from fire, from him from clay. واضح? Get out. إنك الرجيم. There is Allah made hukm then. That's the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that point. As today, a lot of young people, they don't know that. They're making tabdi' outside their realm. First of all, it's not your job. It's people who make the conditions we already spoke about. But also, it's different when you say something's bid'ah versus someone is bid'ah. Different to saying someone who does this is mubtadi' and someone who, this guy is mubtadi'. We need to understand this point. If we cannot understand this, takfir mu'ayyan is very dangerous. Tabdi' al-mu'ayyan is very dangerous. Because who wants to come Yawm al-Qiyamah with the hisab of declaring people kuffar, mubtadi'een, fusaq, bidun dalil? Get it? But now if a shaykh who was qualified came and said, so-and-so, son of so-and-so is a mubtadi' and here's why, then this is a different story. We have to take that now. He brought the Jarh al-Mufassar. Ever remember last week what he said? Al-Jarh al-Mufassaru muqaddamun ala al-ta'dili. Specific, detailed criticism takes precedence over praise. Someone came to you and said, see this guy, so-and-so speaker, here's all his mistakes in usul and qawa'id, really nice, clear. The Shaykh was saying he's qualified. You take it. Me and you cannot get into a field we don't understand, but what's going on is between the two issues again. One group of people, they never listen to anybody's jarh. Alim, no alim. They say, no, I don't get into that. Not correct. Why? We already explained. The ulama, their job is to do this. You can't tell them they cannot do that. They have to. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did jarh. So you have to respect the ulama's the maqam and their statements. Another group of people, they make jarh everybody. Or they make tabdi' themselves. We have to ask them, brother, who said that before you? And what are the issues at hand, please? Gotta bring me something. And we're going to talk about that later, the issues at hand. But when we hear these things, we have to understand and decode the language. Today, people, because they didn't get it, they get so confused. Just as we'll talk about next week and the weeks after, there's a difference between something called tahdhir and tabdi'. They're not the same. Tabdi' means declaration, someone's innovator. Tahdhir is a warning, doesn't mean tabdi'. People don't know this. Someone shaykh said this guy's warned against. Doesn't mean he's mubtadi'. Just means be careful. Certain issues he has. But today, someone who tahdhir, they think it's tabdi'. Or someone, it's tahdhir and tabdi', but they think it's tahdhir. Brothers, one of the biggest problems today, the lay person, they need to be explained to them what is going on when they hear these things. Because unfortunately, if they're just not explained to them, they think everything is just all the same or not even important. I feel bad sometimes when people hear, when the shaykh, someone so said something and it's detailed, you find some people who don't understand it and then reject it. How can they do this? Or another group of people come, unqualified, and making tabdi' of people. You're not even qualified to be doing that. Leave it to the ulama, right? And this is why, at the end of the day, if you follow the principle the Shaykh's teaching us properly, you will be saved from tafrit wal ifrat wal tafrit. No extremism, no negligence. That's the goal. We don't want to be in camp A, they make tabdi' or they refute everybody, they claim innovators without evidence. Nor do you want to be in camp B, they praise everybody and they listen to everybody. Both of them are wrong. You have to be in the middle. And when you walk in the middle, you also have to know why. Because unfortunately, if you just don't walk in the middle, thinking you walk in the middle without the principles the Shaykh explaining, ultimately you may not be also in the middle. You may also be falling to an extreme. The Shaykh also, he completes his point by mentioning this is equivalent to also takfir, is similar to this point, and tafsiq, someone's a fasiq, which is very dangerous as well. And this is a long discussion we don't have time to get into, but Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, may Allah have mercy upon them, they've clarified these issues in detail. And the Shaykh just gave us some examples here, and he's going to give another one we'll talk about next week. Maybe we'll give it to now because of time. An example. He said, I'll give you an example now, which is a lesser degree than innovation. For example, cursing somebody. This is a good example. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he cursed the one who drinks alcohol. Hadith ma'ruf, right? Prophet sallallahu al-khamar, Allah cursed alcohol, and he mentioned 10 categories. 10 categories people are cursed when it comes to alcohol. Hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud, hadith sahih. So this is general, right? This is la'an mutlaq, right? Unrestricted curse. Whoever drinks alcohol is cursed or carries it or all these categories. Then there's la'an mu'ayyan. Somebody you saw them outside drinking alcohol. Hadith Abdullah Ibn Himar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. One day the Sahaba, they brought him to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he was punished for drinking alcohol. He drank the alcohol and the Sahaba, one of them said, may Allah curse him. Ma akthara ma yu'ti bihi. How many times did he keep coming getting beaten for that? Sahabi, right? He's making a mistake, but still Sahabi. The Prophet ﷺ got so angry when he heard them cursing specifically. Why? Why is the Prophet ﷺ angry, guys? What are they doing? What did the Sahaba do accidentally there? I mean, la'an mu'ayyan. They specifically cursed him. قال عليه السلام لا تلعنه فإنه يحب الله ورسوله. Don't curse him, he loves Allah and His Messenger. So I could generally, someone could say, may Allah curse the one who drinks alcohol. Generally. When you see someone drinking alcohol, you can't curse him specifically. Why? Number of reasons. Number one, maybe the one who's drinking it, it's a sin, but also he knows it's a sin, he needs help. What are you doing making la'an of him? What kind of benefit is that? Also, that's what ulama say, la'an is makruh to be doing it. Especially if you do it a lot, you're not going to be from one of the shuhada, you're not going to be from the people, witnesses, the intercessors Yawm al-Qiyamah. One often curses people, won't be from intercessors. It's makruh and very bad to curse people all the time. You have to learn to not do that. Number two, if you curse the person, and the person has khair with them still, they're doing a sin, you want to help them. The Prophet taught us not to do that. Does that mean you can't curse someone specifically? You can, when there's certain conditions met or certain benefit. Difference between the two is very helpful. The Shaykh says, so here, Prophet doesn't generally curse the drink of alcohol, but he warned against specifically doing it. Because when you curse it generally, whoever falls into that, it's not specific. You're not sinful for doing that. Hadith mentions this. But you're sinful by going around cursing people when they don't deserve the cursing. If that's for la'an, you add it to the issues of tabdi'i wa tafsiqi wa takfir. Very, very dangerous. But the point we want to take from all of this, when the ulama are doing now the job, and they made a point clear, someone's the innovator, me and you have to listen carefully what their point is, and we take it. Jarh mufassar, there's it. Because we need to protect our deen. And we know when the Shaykh is doing that, he has taqwa, he fears Allah. He's not somebody who's just going to talk about people. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. Anyone has any questions? We'll take it, inshallah, yes. So that's the thing. If a scholar declares someone innovative with evidence and proof, and then the student knowledge declares himself, it's suspending judgment, it's upon him to clarify the truth as well. If the scholar mentions the proofs, you have to follow that. They don't know it, they investigate it. Important for them to investigate. Someone doesn't know. So their job is to learn. But let's say there's a differing over that person. Another scholar comes and says, well, no, this guy has detailed praise. That's a little bit different. We talked about this. Still the criticism is given weight. As long as the other person does not have reason to declare the criticism not to be valid. But the point is, it's not allowed for us just to be in the middle. We have to be clear. Either we support or reject, but especially when it's clear. It's clear. But the problem is sometimes someone doesn't know. So we encourage the person to go on, please look into it yourself and find out if what your view is on this. But ultimately, today we find that a lot of times this is the issue. Some people stay far away from these things, and ultimately they don't know any of it. And that's not helpful either, because if the student knowledge, people are going to ask him. So they should know who's good and who isn't for the benefit of the community. Yes. Yes, so the ayah we mentioned, كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ, every sect and party is pleased with what they have, is the ulama uses evidence to include the division that happens in our ummah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticized the non-Muslims doing it, and likewise it didn't happen in our ummah, and He told us it's bad. So division ummah is also haram, to make groups and parties, it's blameworthy. Because there's only two parties, Hizbullah wa Hizbul Shaitan. Ala inna Hizbullahi hum muflihun. Hizbullah is successful. Good. So the brother's asking, if someone says bid'ah hasana, is that equivalent to saying reviving and forgotten sunnah? Ultimately, if bid'ah hasana linguistically means something which has asl in the deen but means forgotten or was overlooked or wasn't practiced in this land but not in that land, so it's sunnah hasana. So sometimes we could see that somebody, for example, went to a community where a particular sunnah wasn't practiced and you revived it, then you're doing sunnah hasana. That's what the hadith is telling us. You're not doing bid'ah hasana. So bid'ah hasana then, linguistically, can be considered bid'ah hasana and sayyah, linguistically. Because someone else can come in the hadith says, man sanna fil Islam sunnah sayyah. That's bid'ah hasana, really bid'ah hasana. So some of the scholars have summarized this discussion. Bid'ah, when it comes to the linguistic definition, can be hasana or sayyah, good and bad. Bid'ah, from the shari'i definition, only hasana, only sayyah, that's it. That's a helpful way to understand, because the scholars, when they talked about this, unfortunately it became confused and later went on. That's why it's important to know that. Inshallah, it's more from the time, yes. So we spoke about this before. When it comes to descriptions, Allah talks about it in Surah Hajj that we're Muslims. Everybody's Muslim. Ascribing yourself to the Sunnah, to Salafiyah, to Ahl Hadith, Ahl Athar is all praiseworthy. It's not blameworthy at all. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned. Where the problem comes, obviously, is some people, they say, is it a must or not a must? It's not a must, but it's praiseworthy. That's one. Number two, if someone does it, then we say that as long as someone is applying the truth and following it, something khair. And maybe next week we'll read some of the statements of the ulama in relation to this statement, because I think we translated one book just about the legality of using this term. Shaykh Salim Hilali has a nice book, over 100 pages, about the legality and the way of the Salaf in using this terminology. But where the problem comes is, obviously, does the terminology divide the ummah? This is the question people have. And ultimately we say no, because all of it is praiseworthy, but someone has the right to ascribe to all of them. So maybe next week we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about how these terminologies are good and the other ones are not, and the difference between the two. But now, inshallah, because the salat time, we'll end with this one. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.